For over a century, a shadow stretched across Canada, a shadow cast by buildings that were supposed to be schools but became places of profound suffering for Indigenous children. Today, we're going to step into that shadow and uncover the scary, heartbreaking truth of Canada's residential school system. This isn't just a dark chapter in history. It's a story whose echoes are still felt today, and it's a story that must be told. The idea behind residential schools was simple and devastating too: kill the Indian in the child. Starting in the 1880s, the Canadian government, in partnership with Christian churches, established a network of over 130 of these institutions. They were mandatory. Indigenous children, some as young as 3 years old, were forcibly taken from their families, their communities, and their homes. Imagine being a small child, ripped away from your parents' arms, not knowing if you'd ever see them again. This was the reality for over 150,000 First Nations Métis and Inuit children. Once they arrived at the schools, their entire identity was stripped away. Their traditional clothing was replaced with uniforms. Our long hair, often a source of cultural and spiritual pride, was cut short. Most cruelly, they were forbidden from speaking their own languages. If a child was caught speaking their mother tongue, the punishments were often severe and brutal. They were given new, anglicized names, and every link to their heritage was systematically severed. They were being erased. Life inside these schools was a nightmare of abuse and neglect. The children were chronically underfed, leading to malnutrition and stunted growth. The buildings were often poorly constructed, poorly heated, and rampant with diseases like tuberculosis. Medical care was minimal or non-existent. Beyond the physical neglect, the emotional, spiritual, and physical abuse was constant. Many children were subjected to horrific punishments for the smallest infractions. The staff, who were supposed to be their guardians, became their tormentors. The loneliness was crushing. Siblings were often separated within the same school, denied even that small comfort of family. These weren't schools. They were prisons where childhoods were stolen. The education provided was deliberately substandard. Boys were taught basic farming or trade skills, while girls were trained for domestic service. The goal was not to empower them with knowledge, but to prepare them for a life of manual labor at the lowest rungs of society. They spent half the day in classrooms and the other half performing grueling manual labor to keep the schools running, work that no child should ever have to do. This system wasn't designed to educate. It was designed to assimilate and control. For decades, survivors tried to tell their stories, but their voices were ignored, silenced, or disbelieved. The schools operated for so long, with the last one closing as recently as 1996. Think about that. This isn't ancient history. It's part of our recent past. The full, horrifying truth only began to emerge into the national consciousness with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or TRC, established in 2008. The TRC spent 6 years traveling across Canada, listening to the testimonies of over 6,000 survivors and witnesses. Their stories, filled with pain and courage, painted an undeniable picture of cultural genocide. One of the most haunting tasks of the commission was to uncover the truth about the children who never came home. The official records were incomplete, but the TRC identified over 3,200 deaths of children at the schools. They died from disease, malnutrition, in accidents, or while trying to escape, desperately trying to find their way home. The TRC concluded that the actual number is likely much, much higher. Then, in 2021, the world was shocked when ground-penetrating radar confirmed what Indigenous communities had been saying for generations. Unmarked graves were found on the grounds of former residential schools, starting with the discovery of 215 children in Kamloops, British Columbia. Since then, thousands more potential unmarked graves have been located at sites across the country. Each discovery is a fresh wound, a confirmation of the unimaginable loss. These weren't just numbers. They were children. They had names, families who loved them, and futures that were stolen from them. The legacy of the residential school system is what's known as intergenerational trauma. The survivors who did make it home were often broken. They carried deep emotional scars, struggled with the loss of their language and culture, and had never learned how to parent because they were stolen from their own. This trauma didn't end with them. It was passed down through generations, manifesting as high rates of addiction, mental health issues, and family breakdown in indigenous communities today. The problems we see now are not isolated issues, okay? They are the direct result of a government policy designed to destroy families and cultures. Healing is a long and difficult road. It involves acknowledging the full truth of what happened without sanitizing it or looking away. In 2008, the Canadian government issued a formal apology for the residential school system. But an apology is just the beginning. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, released '94, calls to action concrete steps for all levels of government and society to take to redress the legacy of residential schools and advance reconciliation. These calls include changes to education, child welfare, health, and justice systems. So, what can we do? First, we can listen. Listen to the stories of survivors. Listen to the voices of indigenous leaders and communities. Educate yourself. Read the TRC's reports. Learn about the history of the land you live on. Support indigenous artists, authors, and businesses. Challenge the stereotypes and misinformation you encounter. This history is uncomfortable. It's scary. But we cannot look away. These children and the survivors who carry their stories deserve to be remembered. Their truth must be heard. True reconciliation can only begin when we all share the responsibility of remembering, honoring the victims, and committing to a better future, one built on respect, truth, and justice. Thank you for watching and for being willing to learn.